is Patrick Sullivan, and I'm the President and CEO of the Halifax Chamber of Commerce. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you to our Navigating COVID-19 webinar series, and with today's very special guest, Andy Fillmore, MP for Halifax. There were some very big federal announcements this week on the wage subsidy and the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit, or what we're now calling, what I'm calling anyway, the CERB benefit, just to make it a little easier to say. They increased the wage subsidy to 75% last Friday, and then provided some clarity on that earlier this week, and then announced more details on the CERB application process as well. You can find much more information at canada.ca, and I would encourage people to take a look there first, because there's lots and lots of information available, and then further click-throughs and details on some of these options. We do have a few questions for Andy already, so I'll start off with those. We do have an open Q&A once we wrap up, and you will see the opportunity to ask questions, a Q&A option at the bottom, I think, of the right-hand panel, and you will be able to ask a question. I'll see that, and I'll ask the question for Andy, since frankly there's too many folks to have everybody shouting on the telephone. So if you don't mind, that's the way we'll do it. You can type in your question, I'll ask the question, or Andy will see the question, and then we'll jump into it. So why don't we get started? Thank you very much, Andy. I'm sure it's been a busy few weeks, perhaps busier than you wanted to be in March and in April over the last couple of weeks.
It has been a very different way of working. I'll tell you, I've been on the phone nonstop every day since I got back here prosaically on Friday, March 13th. And the world changed the very next day. So my office has been completely mobilized virtually, trying to solve people's problems, get people home, etc. Ever since we got back. So it's busier than ever in a new way. So anyway, I'm very happy to be with the Chamber today, and hopefully I can be of some help.
Well, thank you for joining us, and thank you for your participation. For those of you that don't know, we've established a new group called the Nova Scotia Business Labour Economic Coalition, and we're meeting 3 times a week with all levels of government, and Andy has been an active participant on that call and enabled us to get additional sort of senior leaders in government on the call as well. So thanks for that, Andy. So now, as we launch into some of the questions, so we're now hearing that the public health measures in place, like social distancing or physical distancing, could be in place until mid-June. So maybe that's a little farther than than folks have commonly heard. But what is the federal government's long-term plan for the small to medium-sized enterprises who could be gravely impacted by a 2 or a 3 month shutdown?
Well, I know it feels like it's been an eternity already, and it's only been 3 weeks since we began this program of social distancing. The truth is that 3 weeks really represents just the first few strides into this marathon that will see us through. But in those 3 weeks, government has developed policies that would, under normal circumstances, have taken a year or two to implement. So we're focusing on those measures right now. Those are the short-term things. Wage subsidies to help avoid layoffs, deferred GST, deferred HST payments, interest-free loans. That's all about helping get the cash flow that people need in the next couple of months, the immediate future. Now, once these are all up and running, we're going to, in the next week or so, then we're going to have the capacity to turn our energies to the longer term. And I'll say, Patrick, when that work begins, the input of the Chamber and its members will be extremely important to help me and to help government understand what the longer term needs are for business, because I think just like government, most businesses are focused on day-to-day right now on the short term. One thing that I can offer about the longer term has to do with stimulus spending as opposed to our medical and financial aid responses to COVID-19. So some part of each of my days is spent working with the Minister of Communities and Infrastructure and the department to craft an economic stimulus response. And it's a program that will invest deeply in community infrastructure to create jobs, and we'll roll that out in the very near future. So I ask you to stay tuned. So that would be under the heading of the longer term piece.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. So, and you've just alluded to this already, but if the current aid packages or supports don't seem to be working, or if they're taking too long, what's the contingency or secondary plan for small to medium-sized enterprises?
Well, it's a great question. I'll start by saying that we do have a great deal of confidence in the plans that we're putting in place right now. I think they're going to work for many businesses across the country. We're really weaving a net or a basket here, if you will, to capture as many people as quickly as we possibly can. And I know that there will be gaps, and we're going to work to close that gaps. But we wouldn't be spending the truly unprecedented amount of money that we are spending to support businesses and workers if we didn't have confidence that these measures would help a lot of people. And I say that with confidence for two reasons. And the first is because these measures have been developed alongside the business community. The input from this chamber group that you've created, from the myriad other Halifax businesses that I've been in constant contact with, have literally helped to craft our economic response. And this two-way dynamic has played out in communities across the country and has helped us to develop these programs. The other thing is we've demonstrated, I think, through this crisis that we'll be nimble and adjust and react as needed. An example of that is boosting the wage subsidy from the 10% that was first announced to 75% based on feedback from business owners like many of your members. So if the adjustments are needed, we'll adjust our approach and we will go further if required. But for now, I have confidence and government has confidence that the foundational tools we put in place are the right ones.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. We're all hoping this is going to end. when it ends, and maybe I'm going too far ahead with this question, but is the government already looking at a reopening plan? And do you think there'll be financial assistance to ensure a smooth return to normal operations?
Yeah, in fact, I would say all the measures we've introduced so far are really about just that, right? They're about keeping employees on the payroll, giving access to cash flow so that businesses can keep up to date in the moment, so that when this finally does end, businesses will be able to get back on their feet quickly. So it's about keeping the embers going, so when the time comes, businesses can come roaring back. The unknown, of course, is how long this will go on, which goes back to your first question. The focus right now is on the immediate term, and we understand that if this goes longer, say into the summer, we'll need to look at a longer term plan for business, and we'll be doing that in close consultation with folks like chamber members. Something else I'm working on, not just on economic recovery, but also this idea of social recovery. I think we also need to keep in mind. I think that Canadians are going to have to learn to engage in social interchange again, to gather in groups, to feel comfortable going outside with people. I'm very interested in how government can position some of our stimulus funding to encourage that social interchange, to encourage joy and play in our communities again after all of this. And I think, as you probably know, the right kind of civic investments can do that. They can also get people out into the local shops, spending their money locally. Just imagine the impact, for example, that the hammocks have had on Halifax waterfront business. There's a relationship there. So stay tuned on that as well. That's I think going to be part of our recovery.
Okay, great. Just a fairly specific question, and we are getting some questions along the way here. So I thought I'd just kind of ask some of them as we went along, if that's okay.
Sure.
On the $40,000 interest-free loan, which I think people should be excited about. I understand that it's additional debt, but it also has a forgiveness portion of about $10,000, which I think is really important. But I've heard from small business owners that there's a problem with that because it requires $50,000 in payroll. And sometimes for some small business owners, you're paying yourself through dividends or draws. So it may not help as much, or you may be paying contract employees. So has there been some consideration given to reducing that $50,000 criteria?
Your members may be edified to know that every evening from 6:30 to 7:30, there is a national government caucus call, and MPs from across the country deliver feedback to a variety of different ministers, primarily the Minister of Finance, but other ministers as well, including the ministers responsible for CERB and for EI and GST and HST and so forth. That particular point has come up a number of times, and I can tell you that the point has been made very clearly with the cabinet and the Minister of Finance. We'll see when the next round of clarification and detail comes out, how that lands. And I will say that I feel we've shown to date that flexibility, that nimbleness that I mentioned. And if somehow that particular vehicle, the $40,000 loan, still leaves a little hole in the basket that I described, well, then we're going to have to find a way to close that hole in the basket. So on that one, please stay tuned. And just as soon as I have information to share, I'll share it.
Okay, that'd be great. And perhaps I got a little ahead of myself there. Maybe I should give you a chance to kind of describe some of the benefits that have been offered for small business already.
Yeah, for sure. Well, the biggest one, of course, is the 75% wage subsidy for employers that will last up to 3 months. We've been hearing a lot about that. So that will cover 3/4 of an employee's salary up to $847 per week. And that, again, helps employers to keep employees on the payroll so that when we come out the other end of this, people are ready to roll. It's also allowing businesses to defer the GST and HST payments and customs duties on imports until the end of June. That I think the figure is that amounts to essentially a $30 billion no interest loan until to Canadian businesses. There's the launching of the CERB, the CERB that we've talked about to help provide, sorry, I beg your pardon, about the Canada Emergency Business Account that you just mentioned, $40,000 loan with up to $10,000 forgivable. And the happy news about that we learned a couple of days ago is that will be open not just to businesses and small businesses, but also to not-for-profits and charities, which was a big ask from the community. Together, those measures represent about an additional $65 billion in direct support to Canadian businesses and about $30 billion more in tax deferrals. So that kind of builds on our work so far to expand work sharing, to launch the business creditability program, the BCAP, and to stabilize our financial markets. I should point out there's also some great work happening at the provincial level as well, and I want to commend Premier McNeil on his announcement yesterday, which I think will be positive for small business. We're all waiting to hear more details about how that will roll out and what shape that will take. Also, the news that the Premier has taken action on commercial rents and evictions, which I think is really important, not permitting locks to be changed and that kind of thing. So when you couple let's pause for a second. So that's a good point to say the response to COVID, I think, really does land with all three orders of government. I mean, the three orders of government impact all of our lives every day, but most Canadians just feel that there's government, and so it doesn't matter which level is doing what. I think all three levels have a responsibility here, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what will come of the council debate on commercial tax deferral. Anyway, all of these things together, coupled with the supports that we've announced for workers, like the CERB, like the CCB increase, like the increased GST credits, I think that's going to help people to stay somewhat liquid and participate in the economy as we go through that. I think all of that is very positive for business.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. And I do think it's important for every business owner to look at this. I mean, I've been describing it as a bit of a cascade. So, let's start with the offers from the federal government. Then let's look at the offers from the provincial government, and then ultimately we'll get to something from the municipal government. So, you really do need to look at all of those opportunities and how they can apply to your particular business. So, yeah, thanks for that. So we have heard from businesses that some landlords are still asking for rent. Perhaps understandably, they have, they may have a mortgage to pay as well. Do you have any expectation, or should we have any hope that the federal government may step in to mandate financial institutions allow for mortgage deferrals rather than having to call, rather every individual business owner having to call their bank?
Yeah, so it's a good segue from the previous point. The rent question comes up a lot, and it is difficult for me to address square on because rent deferrals and tenancy legislation, those are all squarely in the realm of provincial government. So the federal government really has limited power over rent itself. I was glad to see the rent deferral program introduced by the province, as I said, but I have also heard loud and clear that it's simply not a workable solution for many the small businesses in Halifax and these small businesses really embody the kind of the renaissance that we've been seeing here in Halifax of late. So it's really important that we look after them as well. I will say, however, though, that mortgages do involve banks, and I do know that discussions and negotiations between the federal government and the six big lenders, the six big banks, are ongoing. And it's my great hope that we're going to see movement there soon. What that will look like, I'm not sure right now. So please stay tuned for that. Until that happens, we're going to stay focused on the measures that are within the federal government's toolbox, like the wage subsidies, the tax deferrals, the interest-free loans, which will certainly help to ease some of the burden as we continue to add and refine these aid packages.
Okay, I want to get just into a little bit of detail on the CERB, or the CERB program. So this is a question from a participant. There's a lot of confusion with respect to EI and CERB. Please confirm the traditional EI benefits essentially no longer exists and is now replaced by CERB as of March 15th. I don't think that's the case, but anyway, I'll leave it to you. That means employees cannot try to supplement their income with a secondary job as they do while working under EI. So up to 90% of their earnings at 50 cents per dollar is very specific. Anyway, has this been flagged? So is there an opportunity to earn additional income or work part-time while on the CERB benefit, as there perhaps was on EI?
Okay, so there's quite a bit in that question. The first premise was, is EI, as we know it, kind of over and done with? I would say the answer to that is true only for applications that happen after March 15th. So any EI claim that was open before March, that's the magic date. Any EI claim that was open before March 15th will proceed as it had been. The clarification we got on the CERB eligibility this week, yesterday I think it was that you must have stopped working due to COVID-19 after March 15th. So that really is the pivot date. On the question, excuse me, as to whether people can still supplement CERB income with other income, right now, the best information we have from the Ministry of Finance is that no, you can't. We really want to direct that money to folks who need it the most. I would say, however, that we are already hearing, my office has already heard a number of problems with that, a number of friction points. One example was an artist who I think was involved in a television commercial when they were 16 years old, and now gets a small royalty check every month. Does that eliminate his ability to get CERB, even though he lost his job after March 15th? So there are some things we need to work out still. There's also the question about how this impacts students. I'm very aware of that. As the additional detail comes out on the wage subsidy, I think we'll also be getting more information on CERB, including whether or not people can top that benefit up or not. So I know it sounds like I don't have some of these answers. It's because I don't. But I would stress again that we're building these things at breakneck speed and getting them out to you as fast as we can to benefit the greatest number of people as we can the fastest. And that necessarily is going to leave some people behind with the individual special cases. And then we're going to go back and bring those folks along.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key word in the CERB is emergency. We had Minister Ng on the phone the other day, and she reinforced that it is emergency. We did get clarification from a minister's office that 14 days of non-working is required for the CERB benefits. So if you are off for 14 days because of COVID-19, you can apply for the CERB benefit. If you start to work after that, I believe there is an opportunity to earn money, but to qualify again, because you need to qualify every month, you would need to again have 14 days of unemployment. Okay, so and that's my interpretation. So I don't want folks to say that's gospel. They should take a look at the CERB page for sure, but EI for sure still exists, right?
Okay.
So on to another question. Will there be funding or training or upskilling as some of these businesses, processes, or products may have changed over the course of 2 or 3 months to keep current or pre-COVID-19 and for employees?
So I haven't heard that discussed in relation to COVID-19 response so far, but it's a very interesting proposition and an important one. I will say that the government over the last few years has poured a tremendous amount of funding into skills training for individuals and for youth to help them enter a shifting job market. But this really is a unique moment, right? Businesses are pivoting to new and unexpected directions. Bauer, Stanfield's here in Nova Scotia, who are making medical gear. Farmers markets in Nova Scotia are moving to online sales, distilleries making hand sanitizer, and on and on. So I think the fact is businesses are going to have to take some of that on for themselves. And I have absolute confidence in the ingenuity of Canadian businesses to do that. And I will add that with the wage subsidy, businesses will be able to keep employees on staff through a process like that. But the one thing I would add is that over the past several years, this government has been steering Canada toward the transition to a low carbon economy, and that work is still ongoing. We haven't paused that. And we've always said that a part of this just transition, we have a responsibility to help workers to retrain from traditional, maybe petroleum-based skills, and help businesses retool from traditional petroleum-based means of production to renewables. And so we're going to continue to focus on that. We have a continued responsibility to help people adapt to the transition. And I would add also that, and I'm sure you're seeing it too in what you read in the media, many people around the world are seeing the pandemic as an opportunity to really accelerate this transition, as any businesses and so many businesses and even communities are going to have to reinvent themselves after this. This is a great time to advance that transition, and government will be there to help with that, whether it's retooling means of production or retraining workers.
That's great. That's good to hear. And I guess you're absolutely right. I mean, the Chamber, for instance, we've now got 1 or 2 webinars every single day, which is something we never used to do. So, there's a great example. Another question, has there been outreach on the part of government to any insurance companies, or perhaps you could pass this on if you don't know the answer, regarding insurance companies' response to the crisis, saying they will not cover this as business interruption insurance?
It's raised on the calls frequently. Some insurance companies are sweeping this under the force majeure rug. So I don't have a response yet from the cabinet or from the Minister of Finance on how or whether we'll be able to address that. So I guess I'll say stay tuned on that one, and I'll continue to raise it.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. I do have a question from a student who has said, oh, sorry, just jumped. Many of the big and small companies, frankly, have put recruitment on hold, and you alluded to this a few moments ago. So he is a recent graduate and struggling to get a job. Will there be any intervention from government to at least advise big business on to hire if they can afford to hire?
Well, one of the conversations that we're having in earnest right now is what do we do with the very large sum of money that is set aside for the Canada Summer Job Program, the CSJ program. Last year in Halifax, there were, I want to say, 2,000 Canada Summer jobs just in the riding that I represent. This is an enormous amount of money, and it's an enormous way for people to build skills and enter the workforce. So the conversation now is, can we repurpose that money? Because let's face it, especially in communities like ours where tourism and visitorship is so important to the summer economy, there aren't going to be a lot of summer jobs this year, not traditional ones anyway. So again, please stay tuned on that one. I will say for students that we have done the 6-month moratorium on student loan payments, during which interest also does not accrue. And we're also trying to figure out how there was a change in the guidelines for CERB this week that worked against students. I believe that was a perverse outcome and a completely unintended consequence. And there's a tremendous amount of energy now being put on how do we get that right.
Okay, great. Okay, wonderful. Thanks. Just let's see. We've heard from Minister Morneau the wait for some of these programs for businesses could be weeks and worryingly, perhaps even months. How do we ensure SMEs don't fold before being able to receive some of those checks?
I've heard weeks, yes. I haven't heard months. But the wage subsidy, for instance, the minister has clarified will be more likely 3 weeks than 6 weeks. And the interest-free loans, I understand, are going to be available on a much shorter timeline than perhaps we first thought. and the tax deferrals and GST and duty deferrals are all in place already. But ultimately, the federal bureaucracy is moving at a breakneck speed here to get these measures out the door. And I will say, everyone's working from home, so that's another element on this too. People are working hard around the clock in a very unique situation. Yet the policies that we're rolling out would, like I said before, would take normally years to develop and implement, and we're doing that in a matter of weeks. So I'm entirely sympathetic to the concerns. The lifeboats are paddling from the shore out to the wreck as fast as we possibly can. We all wish they could get there faster. Wish we could get the money into people's hands today, but that's just not realistic. So please hang in there, and the funding that is due to you will make it available to you just as quickly as we possibly can.
Okay. Coming back to the CERB and maybe your comment on the university students or the job fund. University students, will they qualify for the CERB benefit? Because they're unable to start work this spring. Judith's example is her not-for-profit would have hired 2 students for the summer, but they can't do that now. She also has a university student at home. Another group that may fall under the radar are people with disabilities who now have many, many more challenges and perhaps have to self-isolate at home. Are there talks to address these parts of the population?
Yeah, I'll be specific, but first I just want to make a general statement. The criteria for CERB, as we understood them from the time CERB was announced until Wednesday of this week, did include students. So people that were expecting to be hired, whether it was through CSJ, Canada Summer Jobs, or an internship or an articling position, whatever it was. We thought that they would be based on what we were seeing on the Government of Canada website and hearing on the calls, and we delivered that news to students. Something happened, and I think it was an unintended outcome. Students, some portion of the student bodies in Canada are no longer eligible for CERB at this moment, but we're working on that. So which students are eligible? Any student that meets the criteria. So for example, a student that was working, and we know that many students, tremendous proportion of the student body in Canada do work, waiting tables or doing research in labs part-time to help them pay their rent and tuition. So if those people are out of work, then absolutely they're qualified if they stopped working after March 15th. But as of today, folks who had a prospective job lined up, they're not covered, and that's where I'm putting energy on right now.
Okay, great. Okay. Again, a specific question: any support available for employees who've had their hours significantly reduced? So maybe part-time employees, but they've had their hours significantly reduced, and they unfortunately won't qualify for the CRB benefit because they're continuing to work with less hours, or EI because they haven't been actually laid off.
So the wage subsidy is the what's meant to cover a situation like that, to keep people on the payroll while they're still working. There was some indication early on, and I haven't heard it discussed lately, that even the CERB could act as a wage replacement. So for example, the example that came to my mind was, say you've got a web designer or a coder who's working from home, but the firm doesn't have any income. Is it possible that the CERB could be an income replacement? There was some early on indication of that. It's not clear right now, so I'm looking forward to the next round of clarification on that as well.
Okay, great. Okay. Any idea, how does one guarantee that only the folks that are that qualify and in need will utilize the funding? And has the government discussed the penalties at all for those bad actors who may take advantage of these opportunities?
So the government has made this decision to relax some of the accountability measures that in normal times you would expect of us to be accountable for the way we spend taxpayer money, so that we can get these benefits out the door, reduce red tape, and get the money to people as quickly as we can. And the fact we heard the Prime Minister, I think it was yesterday, maybe it was the day before, in a very stern voice say the penalties will be severe if anybody diverts money that's meant to help folks to nefarious personal gain. And so I think that's, people really need to sit up and take notice of that if they're thinking about lying on their attestation or otherwise scamming. But I will come back to this. The fact is that at some point, Canadians need to take responsibility for their own actions as well. This goes for social distancing. It goes for staying at home. And the PM alluded to this yesterday when he talked about how each generation asks something different of its people. The government is not omnipresent in the best of times, and when it's all hands on deck like it is right now, that's perhaps particularly true. So we need to rely on Canadians to do the right thing. This is what is being asked of us right now, I would say.
Okay. Going the other way from the $50,000 sort of bottom on the $40,000 loan, a couple of questions actually on whether $1 million is the appropriate spot to stop. So could it be closer to $1.5 million? Because at $1 million, you're only at about 20 employees roughly, at a $30,000 to $35,000, $40,000 salary. So is there consideration to going from lower than $50,000 to $1.5 million in payroll to qualify for the $40,000?
I don't know that there's specific consideration of that underway, but I will tell you that every benefit that has been rolled out has been a result of businesses and communities asking for it. So what's helpful to me and has been for the last 3 weeks is if people can share, let's call them case studies of what their business is facing, what their business is going through, what the friction points are, and what would work better. That's extremely valuable to me, and I welcome anybody to send that little paragraph of a snapshot of their business, what's working, what isn't, what could work better, to my parliamentary address, andy.fillmore@parl.gc.ca. Maybe it can turn up in the comments there.
Okay, that'd be great. Okay, thanks, Andy. I do have a comment from someone that said, is there any update on how not-for-profits or charities will qualify for the wage subsidy? I'm going to answer that quickly and say they're the same as others. So if it's a 30% decline in revenue, then you will qualify. I do have one clarification though, Andy. I've heard the minister say that if year over year there's a 30% decline, that's fine, you qualify. But I've heard him verbally say, or say in interviews, that if that measure doesn't work for you, but you're down significantly versus the previous month because you may be a new business that only opened in the last 6 months, that you would qualify as well. I have yet to see that in print. So I haven't seen that on the pages that talk about the loans or the benefits.
And I confess, I actually didn't hear him say that either. So
Yep.
That's another wait and see.
Yeah. So okay, he has said it. I'll send you the CTV interview.
Thank you.
Just to clarify it.
Yeah.
Let's get on to a question. Getting to the summer, any thoughts on specific support programs coming for the tourism sector, which we know will be significantly impacted? Even if these businesses can reopen in July, there may not be significant recovery in tourism until 2021. Any thoughts on that?
Well, the government has come out and said that, you know, we acknowledge that certain sectors are getting particularly hard hit. While we're right now focused on the immediate help for as many people as we possibly can, the personal aid and the small business aid, I think that's work that will come next. That's the sector-specific aid. Tourism is one example. There are others. But that's certainly a live topic here in Halifax. And as I think you know, Patrick, I'm involved in a weekly tourism Zoom call as well for the tourism sector to talk about how we can address this, being led by the Destination Halifax crew. So immediate needs first, stop the bleeding, and then we're going to get on to physical therapy. What a terrible analogy.
Yeah, exactly. When do you think the 75% subsidy application will appear online? And if and when it does, when do you think folks will get that cash?
Well, I have a better answer for the CERB application. The CERB application will be up on April 6th. And when people choose the automatic deposit option from their MyCRA account, the first people who apply will have money in their accounts 3 days later on April 9th. So that's a very, very quick one. The Minister of Finance, to come back to the wage subsidy, has said that the 3 to 6 week period, he said at the end of the day yesterday, he thinks it'll be more like 3 weeks before the application is up. That puts us, mid to late April. And as for what the processing length of time will be, we don't know what the regime is yet. I think it's going to be abbreviated, much like the SERBs is, relying on attestations and so forth, but we just don't know yet. But I would expect that the money, again, would flow very quickly within a week or two after. So what is that? That gets us to early May. That's a guess.
Okay, no, that sounds like a reasonable guess. BDC. So BDC and the chartered banks have provided or will provide this $40,000. My understanding is it should be available for application by next week online. So please don't call your banker, look online for that. But BDC has a larger loan opportunity, but it's, I'm getting questions here. Folks seem to think that is a very complex application, that they're looking for 6-month cash projections, which, as anyone can guess, are very difficult to do right this minute, and audited financial statements and a personal guarantee. So it does seem like it's, the same hurdles exist, even though this is a government-backed loan program. Is there any hope that some of these things could be relaxed a little as we head forward?
So I can't talk to I don't have the information to talk to the BDC example in particular, but I will tell you that there are recurring anecdotal reporting that elements of the departments in the bureaucracy, the federal bureaucracy, that have been used to doing things a certain way for a very long period of time are now being asked to do them much faster, much differently. And there's some inherent friction or inertia or momentum, maybe you want to call it, to try to get people to do things differently. It's possible that what's happening at BDC is related to that. I don't want to go into actual stories that people have been telling me in my hundreds of calls here with businesses in Halifax, but as a result of what I'm hearing, I and other MPs what we've all been hearing, have gone back to cabinet and said, look, there needs to be really some kind of a directive about loosening the grip on the reins a little bit, and really finding creative solutions and worrying about the accountability on the back end. The important thing now is to move quickly, get the money out, and then we'll worry about the details and the accountability on the back end of it. So again, stay tuned on that.
Great. Back to the SERB benefit. I am getting a couple of comments here and have heard a couple of comments separately that it doesn't provide a lot of flexibility. I understand it's an emergency, and I said that just a few moments ago, but it really seems to me there should be an opportunity for people to do what they can when they can while on the SERB benefit. So we have an example from a photographer who can do some work, editing or other work, but will not qualify for the SERB if that's the case. I have another example separately of a physiotherapist who can do some telehealth work, showing people how to do exercises, that sort of thing. But if they do that and get paid for it, again, they won't qualify for the CERB benefit while they're trying to maintain their clients. So I just encourage you to really take that away, that there needs to be some flexibility in terms of people are changing the way they work, but can't they keep working a little bit to maintain their clients and some business? So
I'm hearing it loud and clear. And again, if the people asking the question would like to send me their snippet, I will include that in my pile of evidence. Again, the first act was to help as many people as quickly as we can, as simply as we can, and that necessarily left some people behind. The idea that people should be able to supplement their income makes perfect sense to me, doing piecework or gig work or whatever it is in the examples you've given. So leave that with me, and I'll continue to press the case.
Okay, that'd be great. Okay, I'm going to come back to seasonal businesses again, and it's a combination. It's kind of a double whammy. So their business is seasonal, but those folks, because they're seasonal, don't have $50,000 in payroll. So I think again that that may be another example of why $50,000 doesn't work, because the business may only operate 3 or 4 or 5 months.
Yeah, I'll take that as good feedback. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay. Sorry, I'm going to get back to, let's see. The Prime Minister has asked businesses, and Minister Morneau as well, to ask business to show they're doing their best to pay the other 25% of an employee's salary. What constitutes their best, and what steps do they find to hire these to hire these folks back if they're at zero revenue right this minute?
The details are being ironed out, so please be patient and hold fast, hang on. I think I will say that I think by and large most businesses can understand whether or not they can afford that expense of the final 25% of the salary or not, or maybe it's 5% or 10% or not, or maybe people go to 4 days a week and they're covered by 75%. I think there is flexibility there, but let's hold out for the details. The big point, though, is that the wage subsidy is really intended to keep workers in their jobs. So ultimately, we need to keep red tape to a minimum in order to achieve that outcome. But for now, we're going to have to wait and see.
Okay. I'm going to put you on the spot again with CERB. If someone was to lose their job today, would they lose the first 2 weeks of CERB, or could it be retroactive if they're not getting paid for the last 2 weeks?
Let's see. My understanding is if they lost their job today, then there needs to be a period of 14 days of unemployment. Right. So CERB would kick in after the 14 days from today.
Right. So good. Yeah. Good point. Yeah, I think you're probably right. There is more detail on the CERB page, so I'd encourage folks to go to canada.ca and then drill down on that page. Okay. Let's see. I'm just flipping through the questions here. What if you previously made more on EI than on CERB? I'd stick with EI.
If you stick with EI until your benefits run out, and then we'll cross the bridge then. Yeah, I mean, there's no way that streamlined, simplified processes can account for all of the nuance of everyone's different situation. So I think everybody just does their best and sure, stick with EI if that's the better benefit for you.
Yeah. Sorry, I've got a question here. What is the eligibility date for CERB? You can't apply for CERB until you've done 14 days with no income. But does the first payment backdate to the start of the 14? Listen, if I would provide advice to somebody, I would say they should apply for CERB. Don't wait 14 days to apply for CERB. I mean, sorry, I'll ask you, Andy.
That's my advice. Don't wait 14 days. Apply right away. Set up your CRA account. Choose automatic deposit. Be ready to roll so that on April 6th, you can get that application in.
Right. I think there is some criteria, and Andy, I don't know if you know this specifically, but there's some suggestions on when you should apply based on your birth month, because they expect it to be overwhelmed next week. So if you do go to the CERB page, you can see some suggestions on when to apply. I may be mixing that up with the loan, but I think it's the CERB. If you're born in December, wait 3 or 4 days to apply, just because they don't want the system to crash on the first day.
Okay. Okay, I'm with you now. Yeah, there is a program. It goes Monday would be, so you have to divide it by the days of the week. So Monday would be for January to March. Tuesday would be April to June, etc. down the line like that. That's going to help just to keep the data pipes uncongested enough that we can manage all that's coming down them.
Right. Okay. Perfect.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm looking for additional questions here. If anybody has any questions, please type them into the Q&A or the chat for that matter. The Q&A is probably a little bit better. I don't know. We've been talking for a few minutes, Andy. I mean, are you seeing a theme coming out of here? I mean, we seem to be talking about now, but obviously people are thinking about the summer and thinking about the future. I mean, is there something you want to talk about there?
Well, you've nailed it. Right now, we're trying to put the fire out. I am looking forward to the day when I can talk more about the infrastructure investment that we'll be rolling out. We'll be repurposing some of the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Plan money, ICIP money, for COVID response stimulus spending. There will also be new money. And so we're looking at different mechanisms on how to deliver that to municipalities and communities as quickly as possible, using existing mechanisms like the gas tax, for example, in a way that doesn't necessarily get involved in the complicated negotiations that are the integrated bilateral agreements between the federal government and the provinces. So I don't want to get ahead of myself there, but stay tuned for that. That's going to have a pretty major impact. But right now, everybody's focus is on today and tomorrow, and we'll get to next month.
Okay. I see. I've got a question here on the wage subsidy. It says there's work that needs to continue whether a business is open or not. Businesses have admin staff working to keep the business alive, even if the business is closed. Will the business qualify for the wage subsidy, even if they're not open? I think the criteria for qualification is about the 30% decline in revenue.
The criteria, as we understand it today, is your gross revenue is down 30%. 30%, is that right? Gross or net? Gross. Your gross revenue is down 30% from the same month last year. But that, again, the questioner raises a very good point on flexibility and like making this work for the most number of businesses. So I would take that as good feedback as well. And if the person would like to send me an email, I would welcome that.
Okay. Just while we're talking about the CERB, we should remind people that the province did come out with the two options yesterday. One of those was sorry, I'm just going to flip to it here because I think I've got it open. There were two. One, the COVID-19 Worker Emergency Bridge. So that is up to, I think it's about $1,000. That will help employees to bridge from today to the time the CERB is actually paid out. So that's important for self-employed folks who may not be necessarily able to apply for EI. That is available. So please take a look at that. And then for all the other folks on the line, there is the, let's see, what is it? The Small Business Impact Grant, which is up to $5,000. If a grant of up to $5,000, if 15% of their revenue from sales in either February or April at the option of the business owner has been impacted. So if the revenue is down 15%, they can get up to $5,000. So if you think of a small restaurant that has been significantly impacted, asked to close, they could qualify for that $5,000 as well. So important to remember that this is a cascade, right? So let's start with the folks, the federal government, and thank you, Andy. And then we go to the provincial government, and ultimately we'll go to the provincial government. Another question here: if a business has leased vehicles, is it reasonable to have leasing companies defer payments during the crisis? Leasing companies, in addition to some of the, I guess, banks and other folks. So, I mean, it's essentially a mortgage payment.
Yeah, it is essentially a mortgage. I haven't heard that one come up yet. There were some other anecdotal examples of other sort of monthly payments that were due, and would the mortgage relief apply to those? So let me take that back as feedback and plug it into the machine.
Okay, great. Okay. We do seem to be running out of questions, so I'm going to, ask if there's anything that you wanted to let us know as we're finishing here, Andy.
Please keep the feedback coming. I mean it when I say what we've been able to achieve so far, we've been able to do because of business owners and individuals sharing their experiences and keeping lines of communication open. I really appreciate it. I don't know, I'm in my mind, I'm trying to decide whether or not to say the next thing I'm going to say, but look, this timeline, the timeline of this virus isn't set by government, it's set by the virus itself. And although we feel like we're out of control in so much of this in this strange and uncertain time, the one thing that we can control is the choices that we make, the personal choices that we make, whether we go outside or practice social distancing. And the virus does respond to that. So we can control those things. And I look outside, and when I go for my afternoon run, I still see people hanging out in crowds, doing the things that they're not supposed to. So I guess, please help to spread the word in your friend groups and in your families. And no one wants to sound scoldy, but man, we control how long this lasts, and we just have to do the right thing. So I encourage you to do that, and I thank you for doing that.
Well, thank you very much, Andy. And I think I'd have to reinforce that as well. I mean, the majority of the folks on the call, I recognize a lot of names. And I know these are people who are concerned about their businesses and run great businesses, right? These are great businesses. And I would absolutely echo your comments. The faster we can make this go away, the better. And if that requires us to all suffer a lot of pain for a short period of time, that's much better than pain for a long period of time. So let's keep that physical distancing. Let's ensure that we're respecting the health authority and the comments and that they're coming out with every single day, because the sooner we can make this go away, the better for all of us. So absolutely echo that.
You know, if there's any Halifax entrepreneur who can manufacture a whole bunch of 6-foot radius hula hoops, 12-foot diameter, there's a business opportunity here.
Well, that's right. And Andy, I suppose you would also say, if anybody can manufacture anything for the healthcare sector, they need to be thinking about that as well, because Stanfield's has now changed. I know I've been sending emails to the provincial government, but if anybody has manufacturing systems or opportunities to change some of their production, please, certainly think about that. I know there's lots of, you can write to me, Patrick Sullivan, at President Halifax Chamber, but we're happy to pass those comments on. So thanks very much, Andy. I did have a number of people thank you in the chat function. So for all the folks that were on the line, thank you very much for joining us today. Really appreciate the communication, your availability, and I certainly appreciate you being on the call that we have 3 times a week and providing great information from the federal government, and I know advocating for us to your colleagues in caucus. So thank you very much for that. We do appreciate the constant communication as well. So let's keep that coming. If anyone has any questions or comments, please send them to concerns@halifaxchamber.com, concerns@halifaxchamber.com, and we will pass on those comments or we'll utilize those comments in our advocacy. We are hosting more and more webinars every day and every week, so please take a look at our events calendar. We have experts in crisis communication. We have some folks talking next week about how to utilize your financial systems if you're in manufacturing, how to ensure that your financial systems are good for hospitality. We have mental health professionals, lots of folks. So take a look at that. Really appreciate it. We have recorded this webinar and it'll be available to all attendees shortly. I would caution for myself, this is a moving target. So, the things that we answered today may change over the next few days. And I think, Andy, you'd probably echo that. I mean, we've seen lots of changes already. So do, take a look at this webinar if you like and the recording, but you need to take a look at the Halifax Chamber website. We're trying to keep our COVID-19 page, which you'll find right off the homepage, up to date. And I know Canada.ca will have the most recent information as well. So thank you very much, Andy, and I'll talk to you again in about 5 minutes.
Thanks, Pat, and thanks, everybody.
Thank you.